Good morning, everybody. I'm quite happy to welcome you at the C3 Global Cloud Skills Virtual Tour today, June 2nd. And I'm here at ETC Enterprise Training Center in Vienna, and it's quite sunny. And it is my first day where we welcome students already in classroom in our training center. So I hope you're all doing fine in these challenging times. And so let's talk about where we are and why we are here. It's the first ever virtual edition of this Cloud Skills Tour, and where we discuss digital skills with business leader and IT management. And I'm quite proud to be the one who can welcome you to this session. My name is Michael Svoboda, and I am one of the co-founders of LLPA, the Leading Learning Partner Association. And in my daily life, I'm the CEO of ETC Enterprise Training Center, the #1 training center in Austria. I'm quite happy that we are able to share now some intro informations about the LLPA and the Global Cloud Skills Tour. And I will start my presentation for you right now. Good. So let's start with the virtual series of this LLPA event. And let's start with who is LLPA and why is LLPA a value for you and your business. The LLPA originally was started in 2009 with an informal group of training centers exchanging best practices. And after 2 years, we start to formalize the collaboration together and founded the Leading Learning Partner Association in the Netherlands. And we started with 20 members, and these 20 members grew year over year. And I'm quite happy and proud that we have today an organization with about 33 members covering more than 52 countries on the global scale. So you can see the globe here and where we are present with the LLPA. So we are able to deliver services all around the globe, and we are focused on providing skills on a high level area for you and your organization. With our 33 members, we did certify more than 5,000 people in Azure already in the last part of the last fiscal year of Microsoft. And this fiscal year, so the actual one, we trained more than 100,000 students on Azure. So that's quite impressive, and I'm really proud of that. So let me continue with what are the services that LLPA can offer to you and our partners and our customers. First, training services. LLPA can offer scalable learning services organized, managed by one central location. So, for example, if you are based in my country, in Austria, and you are interested to deliver training all around the globe or in your subsidiaries in several countries in Eastern Europe or in Western Europe, Australia, Asia, the US or South America, then we can organize that with a single point of contact for you. That also works in all the other countries. We also can offer certification services. That means that we can take care of you and your needs to certify your people and include reporting services so that you always know what happens in your company, what happens in your trainings. Also, we can offer centralized resources, so partner readiness activities and also customer marketing, market penetration services. So that means that we take care that partners are ready to deliver services, that our customers are ready to use the modern services, the modern desktop, Azure, and similar services. And last but not least, the summary of all that means that we are able to develop your training plan, that we develop your next step in skills building within your organization. So let's continue about the details of the Global Cloud Skills Tour. So when we decided to start the Global Cloud Skills Tour, we planned to deliver in several locations worldwide this event that you can see now on a virtual base, but we planned it as an on-premise event. So 4 continents, 9 events, different locations like Belgrade, Milan, Johannesburg, Helsinki, Singapore, Amsterdam, Mexico, Berlin, and finally also in Vienna. But then it happens, as we all know, that Corona changed our plans, changed our daily life. And so we decided that the Global Cloud Skills Tour, with all the plans behind that, have to be delivered virtually. So what is the reason for the Global Cloud Skills Tour? We want to bring together business decision makers into one room now on a virtual base to discuss cloud skills gap and to share best practices, to ask questions, to talk with each other also about the newest developments in that area. So finally, we already delivered a part of that in the pre-corona time. So we started in Belgrade. It was really quite a successful event. We had our event in Milan, in Johannesburg, and in Helsinki. And as you can see on the pictures, always it was quite impressive to have these people in the room, to have these discussions, and to have all these new informations around skills to the cloud services Microsoft offers. But then COVID-19 came and the world changed completely, and with all of a sudden tumbled into the virtual revolution. So I guess all of you recognized in the last weeks and months that everything was delivered virtually, done virtually. A lot of you are in the home office, maybe still in the home office. And we had also to adapt to this new situation. And I'm really proud of the team of LLPA, how fast they adapted to turn our business into full online and full virtual, and even better, combinations of online and virtual instructor-led training, practicing the true blended by default. So the new normal was completely different to that what we experienced in the months and years before. That also counted for the Global Cloud Skills Tour. The other planned in-person events were canceled, and we had to think of a new way of discussing cloud skills and the digital transformation with you. It is great to see we have been able to adapt to this and transform the Cloud Skills Tour in an international virtual series that spans over 6 weeks with really amazing topics. And so every Tuesday, starting already in May, last week, May 26th, we have these sessions at 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. CET. So let me show you what we are talking about. We had a great lineup of speakers, and all of them are very knowledgeable and happy to present you their experience. Cloud skilling is their everyday practice, and it's a great honor to have them in this series, helping you taking the next step in your cloud skills journey. As I already mentioned, we started May 26 with the cloud and skilling understanding. So that was a quite successful session, and we are happy to continue today with part 2. Today, the topic is cloud agility. And as you can see, my step in is today because Patrick Kirsten, our LLPA chairman, has to take another responsibility at the moment. And I'm quite happy then to introduce your speaker of today and tell you what happens next. So before I introduce your today's speaker, let me show you in a short time frame the next steps. You have part 3 next week, balance between tech and skills. You have on June 16th, the growth mindset. June 23rd, the foundations for successful cloud adoption. And finally, at the end of June, customers achieving their desired outcomes. So you can see that every session we planned in this virtual skills tour of LLPA is really impressive and really interesting if you are on the way to a cloud world in your company. And if you have the question, how does it work that I skill my people to be ready for this transformation? Good. So let me tell you a little bit about housekeeping. You have a question box on your screen. So if you have any questions during the session, please enter it in this question box. And as soon as it is possible, I will talk to your speaker that we also answer your questions. And some of them will be answered finally at the end of the session. And now I'm quite happy and proud to introduce your today's speaker on the C3 Global Cloud Skills Virtual Tour with the topic Cloud Agility. It's Jussi Roind, Azure Div Product Marketing Manager, Microsoft Finland. Jussi, stage is yours. I'm quite happy to listen to your session about cloud agility.
Thank you, Michael. Very happy to be here. Michael, can you confirm that I'm sharing my slides and you're able to see them as well?
So I can see that you have the main slide at the moment on the screen.
Excellent. So welcome on my behalf. My name is Jussi Roine. I'm based in Helsinki, Finland, and I work for Microsoft. I'm part of the Western Europe organization. So what I do on a daily basis is I try to reach out to communities, to partners, to customers, to understand what's perhaps holding them back to better utilize the cloud and or also hear the thoughts, the challenges, the suggestions on how their life could be easier. And my main focus is all developers, especially on Azure side, but also including Microsoft 365, Office 365, and the on-premises as well. And what I'll do today, I'll talk to you about being future ready. If you want to reach out to me later on, there's my Twitter account, and also there's a short link to my LinkedIn bio. I'm happy to connect with anybody listening in on this. And as Michael said, if you have any questions, happy to take those during the session, but I think we also have a little bit of time in the end to go through any additional questions. So this picture was taken in 1982. It's from the movie Blade Runner. And this, the idea with Blade Runner was that it showed us what the future would look like in 2019. So the anticipation in 1982 was that people would dress up like this. I'm not sure it really happened, or at least I'm not dressing up like this. But it also shows us that being future ready is quite a challenge at times, even though we still do have people who dress either widely or really personally, and that's fine as well. I got started in 1982. I got a VIC-20 computer. My parents bought this to me when I was 5 years old in 82, when Blade Runner came out as well. And at the time, this was the best thing ever. You would get 5 kilobytes of RAM, but only you got 3.5 available to run your own code, play games, or run programs. And This was about, what, 37 years ago, and it felt like this was everything we could ever need. In 2020, if I go to Azure, Microsoft Public Cloud Platform, and I want to spin up a virtual machine to run my business applications in there, one of the largest ones I can now get is called the M416S. It gives me 416 virtual CPUs, a lot of memory, a lot of disk space, and it takes me about 5 minutes to choose this, click provision, and then have it up and running in the cloud. And I can also select what region I want to choose. And it's been amazing now comparing back to 1982. It's been amazing when I visit with customers, they might have an IT pro or developer sitting in the back of the meeting room, a bit like this, and going, it takes 5 minutes for me to provision this. I only have 3.5 minutes, so why can't this be faster? So in a sense, when the future is finally here, we start demanding more. But then again, we kind of still remember how it used to be before we had this scalability, this elasticity, and the availability of different services. So one of the great things that Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, said that we are moving from a group of people who know it all to a group of people who want to learn it all. And I've been in the business since 1990, working as an entrepreneur, and also spent about 15 years running a partner company, which was also a learning partner with Microsoft. And most of that time, the business has been about having people who know it's all. And this was perhaps at the time when Microsoft would release a new operating system or a new software every 3 years. And we would get this huge stack of printed manual. At least in the Nordics, we got these phone books delivered on our doorsteps with everybody's names on it and phone numbers. And now, since we don't have that anymore, and I'm happy for that, it also means that we keep on learning on a daily basis. The continuous learning is key here, not knowing something and holding on to that knowledge and trusting that I'm okay with this knowledge for the next 3 or 4 years. So reflecting a bit back to 2000 now, which is only 20 years ago, I was running a team of IT pros and developers and architects for a multinational consulting company. And one of the responsibilities I had at the time was to hire more developers to work on customer projects. So 20 years ago, more or less, the requirements for a developer would be capability to install the development tools, meaning run setup, next, finish, reboot the machine. Knows perhaps how to do a bit of HTML to do a web page, maybe some scripting, nothing too fancy though, and knows how to open a browser, press F5 to reload the page and see if there's a problem. And since then, the requirements have changed quite a bit. As well as in 1990, we had Windows 3.11, the first real graphical interface. And the work of IT pros, the know-it-alls at the time, was mostly about editing these mysterious text files to optimize things. And in a way, life was still easier at the time, but you had to memorize a lot of things. And now it seems oftentimes it's enough if you can do a quick search on Google or Bing or something else and pick up the first thing you find and then figure, okay, perhaps this is the only thing I need to know about this. And that's a bit of a false assumption as well, because there's so much knowledge to be gathered here. Eurostat, the EU statistics ministry, collects statistics on everything. And in December 2018, so this is the latest that they have, on December 2018, they published the enterprise public cloud usage in the EU region. And this data was extracted in 2018. It was modified a bit in 2019. The next one we'll get, it will be in 21. And if you have a look, the average on the EU nations is about 28%, meaning that about 28% of enterprise companies in the EU region use one or more public cloud services. So this could be email, file storage, something like Teams, perhaps using virtual machines, running custom software in the cloud. So 28% is the rough average. Finland is leading. We are at about 66% in Finland. And that's not the reason I have the statistics because I'm proud of Finland, but the reason here is that there's quite a bit of difference between the different nations. Although Norway on the far right is catching up to Finland, I'm really happy with this, definitely. But then we have some nations that really haven't been able to leverage public cloud that much yet. So this is interesting statistics to understand what the maturity level of customers and partners is in each nation. For example, in Finland, if I visit a customer and say, would you like to talk about having your email in the cloud? About 97% of the customers would say, well, we've been in the cloud for about 15 years, so perhaps we want to move forward. What's next? As opposed to a different nation, it could still be about migrating email to the cloud and then getting the benefits from all of the additional things in the cloud. So when I got started with Microsoft Azure, this is an example on that. This was about 12 years ago in 2008. Microsoft Azure, which is the public cloud platform, was something you could download and install on your laptop. So on the left, you can see the simple graphical interface if you want to run a web service in the cloud. And on the right, you would see the troubleshooting and debug information. This was more or less how it was at the time. And since then, we've moved forward quite a bit. So the journey to the cloud, and this is kind of the background on how to be future ready. The journey to the cloud is often you start with on-premises, and we still have plenty of on-premises. And I want to be clear, it's not inherently bad. You have on-premises workloads. That's perfectly fine. But often within your on-premises, you have certain workloads that perhaps would be better off in a different platform. It might not be your core business. It might not be something your customer really wants to maintain anymore. So the next step is, of course, infrastructure as a service. And this is often done with a lift and shift. We pick up a virtual machine or a database, shift that to the cloud, and it's almost the same in the cloud, but somebody else worries about the hardware, about connectivity, perhaps about security as well. And then when we move on to innovation, we get to serverless. So somebody else manages that platform for us, but we run our workloads on top of that. And now with Power Platform and also with Azure, we also have this less code or no code platforms, such as Power Automate and Power Apps and Power BI, that allow us to build business applications without really becoming developers ourselves. So this is the high level picture on what the journey to the cloud typically is. And when we look this in a bit more deeper, and this is about understanding how you as a partner or as a company wanting to benefit from this need to be future ready. It's about understanding that migration is other things than just lift and shift. It could be rehosting. Let's pick up this workload, this virtual machine, this database. Let's put it in here, and on the way, we'll fix things. Or let's refactor this. Let's get rid of the virtual machine, but let's refactor that workload to something perhaps in a container, on a serverless platform, or something else. Or then it could be re-architecting it to become more cloud native so that we benefit from those innovations in the cloud, and we could also need to rebuild it all together. Often what I see is with customers with a lot of custom solutions, some of those might have been built 10, 15 years ago, when they now look into what the future holds for them, cloud native doesn't necessarily have to be about opening up your development environment and writing a lot of code. It could be simply replacing that with something that's already available as part of Teams or SharePoint Online or something similar. So cloud native in that sense simply means let's get rid of the legacy, let's get rid of virtual machines, let's try to make this lightweight so that when our business requirements change in the future, we can also modify this cloud native application to better suit our needs. So the IT pros, I love this picture. I don't know who took it, but I think this fairly well resembles how I looked 25 years ago as an IT pro. So IT pros for the past 25 years, the requirements mostly for them was you need to be capable of installing Windows, whatever version, 95, NT, 2000, 2003, and so on. You need to be capable of installing a web server, a database server, then installing any kind of updates like service packs, then hotfixes, and then reboot the servers as many times as needed, often 27 times. And once this was done, I've met so many IT pros who said after all of this was done, they would take their hands off the keyboard and say to the business unit who perhaps requested this solution to be provisioned for them, the IT pro would say, my job here is done. And somebody on the business side would say, well, hold on, we have a server that's running, but nothing is running on it. So how do we actually get the benefit for business from this? And too often the IT pro would say, well, I have no idea, but I'm done with my things. I don't really care if there's any benefit for you, but I've done the deployment, but there's nothing that helps the business. And when I see an IT pro internalize the idea that they need to also bring in value, they need to add value to whatever they're doing, then we suddenly realize that we can actually get rid of all this, automate this, and use those skills, capabilities, and hours of those people for something that's more beneficial. But it's hard to let go of things you've known for 25 years and then understand that you need to learn something new that you might not yet know, and it feels challenging and complex. But that's part of being in IT. It's continuous learning. So from 1990 to about 2012, oftentimes the data centers I visited in the Nordics and in Europe, they would look something like this. A lot of cables, nobody really knew what happened here, but it kind of worked, just don't touch anything. And when the summer is coming, we'll have a small table fan on the door to push the hot air out. Let's hope the temperature is not rising too high. And now, sometimes I might meet with an Exchange server admin managing the email service of a company. And they feel their job is now this. They flip different switches a couple of times, and that's mostly it. But that's mostly because of automation and because the complexity has already been resolved. And now we need to come up with something more beneficial, something that adds more value. And it's not about flipping switches because anybody can do that. So a company called Spiceworks did a survey. This is from early 2019. They did a survey to ask different companies on what sort of plans those companies have in adopting different modern communications and collaboration tools, including Skype for Business, Teams, Slack, and so on. And you can see that Workplace by Facebook at the time, 1% were already using it, not much, and perhaps 1% were planning to use it in the next 12 months. That's mostly it. No plans for about 91% of those who responded to the survey. But if you look at the top one, Skype for Business, 44% of companies were using it, and 41% didn't have any plans to deploy it. But 5 and 4%, total 9%, were planning to deploy Skype for Business in the next year or two. And this was at the time when we already had Microsoft Teams, and it was fairly clearly communicated that Teams is the future and Skype for Business, the next version might not happen anymore. And when I saw the results in here, I realized that not all companies are future-proof. Not all companies are seeing what's happening on the landscape. Oftentimes, we're waiting 3 years for an announcement to come, but now we start getting those on a weekly basis, which means we have to be future-proof to understand what's happening so that we are not investing on things that don't have a future anymore. So the sort of growth mindset, and I was presenting at the LLPA event this January in Helsinki. That feels so distant now, but that was still a time when we could meet in person. And one of the discussions I had with the attendees there was about the growth mindset. And this applies to partners, this also applies to customers, but this also applies to individuals. And it's about acquiring those abilities and coping with changes. Now, obviously, we've had a lot of changes in the past couple of months. Some of those are huge challenges. Some of those are perhaps lesser challenges. And then finding a way to make a difference. And one of those things is that instead of canceling events, let's do those as an online event. And let's make those more inclusive, allowing people to attend from the comfort of their home office or their living room, which of course is great. But at the same time, we also need to acquire the abilities for the future. Perhaps we will need to do more hybrid events. Perhaps we need to understand different sort of customer asks in the future when things inevitably will change at some point again. So customers, when I meet with them, they expect a lot. So we have this sort of customers who are forerunners. You might meet up with them at 9 in the morning and they say, hey, Jussi, we saw this announcement on Twitter last night at 2 a.m. Something new was released in Azure. So what's the best practice for deploying that? And I'm still having my first cup of coffee in the morning. And I say, I have no idea because I'm sleeping, but let me have a look on what's available and then we'll probably figure it out. And this is perfectly fine, but it simply goes to show that some are really eager to leverage whatever is coming out and then perhaps deciding if there's value in there. And then we have these sort of companies who go now or never. If you remember from the mid-1990s, the movie Speed with Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock, they had the bus they needed to hop over the missing part of the highway. So this is the sort of situation where somebody says in 2010, we do not trust the public cloud. But in 2020, that same person will call you, perhaps on a Friday at 5 o'clock when you're just packing your bag and heading out and say, we've been putting off this public cloud thing for 10 years, but now we have to do it because we are running out of support or we need to migrate or something else. And it needs to happen this weekend and the deadline is Sunday noon. Can you make it happen? And obviously, as a business owner, you would say, yeah, let's see. I hope we can make it happen, but that will be a challenge. Someone might call it a death march project, but I like to call it a challenge. And then we have those who say, well, yeah, the public cloud, yeah, the new innovations, Windows 10, all that. You go first, we'll see how that goes. If you think, we can say, yeah, we didn't trust that one. But if you make it, then we can perhaps decide what we're going to do. But we have special needs. Oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, those special needs might be a single Excel file on a local file share that everybody fills in, perhaps their hours for the week or their sales quotas. And they simply cannot see an option that Excel could be anyplace else than on the K drive or the T drive. It's been sitting there for 15 years. It needs to be there for the next 15 years. And then finally, we have companies and customers who realize it's a journey. So we get started and it kind of never ends. We will always have innovations. We will always have changes and we simply adapt to those. We discard the ones we don't really care about, that don't really benefit us, and then we ramp up on those that we feel makes us more future-proof. A quick example, I have a few of these coming up. So a quick example, before I joined Microsoft, that was last year, I spent about 15 years running my own business and also working as an architect and a trusted advisor to plenty of customers. And one of those projects that I was handed over from one of our customers was creating a website that scales indefinitely. And they literally said, this website needs to have better reachability than google.com and microsoft.com. And I said, well, perhaps that might be a challenge. We can try, but what sort of a budget do you have? And then they said, well, we don't really have a budget. You just make it happen. And of course, as a consultant with billable hours to make, I really said, okay, we can make this happen. So we had 3 months and we built the website, the backend and everything else. It was really fast. It scaled really neatly. And then when we launched the website, this was in 2018 after the summer, all the pages loaded in less than a second, and the customer was immensely happy. We had a lot of traffic on the launch day. But then at some point, I got this error. We were running everything in the cloud, and I got this error. Currently, 0 instances of servers are available. Please get available machines and retry later. And we were using the cloud, which should scale indefinitely based on our settings. So I reached out to somebody I knew at Microsoft at the time and said, attach this screenshot and said, well, yeah, I understand that the cloud might have some issues, but is the cloud full now? And 5 minutes later, they came back to me and said, okay, we found this and this problem. We fixed that for you. Now it scales again. So the architecture we ended up with, and I wanted to include this in here, just to give you a quick highlight, that we built a website that in practice scaled indefinitely. We were serving up to 10,000 people at the same time through the web app. And it was relatively simple in the end. We only had 3 months, so we figured let's not build anything too complex. Let's build something simple so that when it needs to scale, we all understand how it scales. So we had a web application in Azure. We had a custom API that gave us the results the website needed to show. And we had a database in the backend that we updated on a daily or hourly basis. That was mostly it. So running this website with about 10,000 people, maximum concurrent users per month, cost the customer about 1,500 euro per month, including test, development, and production environments. So this was really a sort of a testament that the cloud scales, but you will still run into problems at times, and then you need to react. You need to be future ready. So on the topic of Azure, and I often feel that people might feel a bit lost with Azure because it's about 200 services now, and it doesn't mean you have to know all of them by heart. That's not the point. Typically, you need to know 4 services. Virtual machines, applications, meaning web applications and APIs, users and identities in Azure Active Directory, and databases as Azure SQL. This is the core. Then you can expand your view. And if I'm mentoring IT pros or developers, perhaps they're ramping up on Azure or they're finding a new way to understand new technologies, I often start with this and say, it doesn't mean you have to learn everything. You learn the key pieces, then you expand based a bit on what sort of projects you're working on, what sort of customer engagements you have, or what sort of needs and demands you have from business. And then you could expand to functions, meaning serverless, or you could expand to security, or you could expand to billing and cost management. And then you take a step back, you get additional things like integration and workflows. And perhaps one step back, you get machine learning, all the fancy AI stuff. But it doesn't mean you start with those. You start in the core, you understand the basics, and then you take one step further back each time you feel you need to learn something new, or when you feel there's a new demand. And then there's on the outer circles, there's the more complex ones. And oftentimes you will find a weird service like on the right now. It doesn't mean you have to learn it, but at least you need to understand the basics of that, again, to be future-proof. We did a study last year. This was in the Finnish market. And keep in mind that Finland is heavily utilizing new technologies. It might be because of Nokia back in the day, or it might just be that we like to tend to ourselves and not really see people in person and just learn new stuff. So we did a survey last year, and we found out that on average, 30% of employees of a given company are not willingly studying or learning new skills at work, unless their manager specifically tells them, okay, Matti, this Monday you will spend 8 hours learning X. And then they will spend 8 hours learning X because they had to. It doesn't mean they actually learned that, but at least they spend 8 hours learning that. And while this is a bit sad, I also feel it's part of the way that people have been studying in the past. They might not need to take responsibility on their own, that they need to be relevant, they need to be future ready, they also need to apply their skills every day. It might be that they studied something 10 years ago and feel, well, I studied that 10 years ago, so I should be good for the next 20 years. But especially with technology, that simply doesn't work anymore like that. So a quick example from another customer I had a chance to work with. This was in 2019, so fairly recent. They needed a website with a few integrations, and I was helping out the customer as a trusted advisor so that when they would send out their tenders, they would then get their offers. We went through those offers, and then we selected one partner to work on those offers. So one of the offers we got, we titled that as How Hard Can It Be? So we needed to build a website with a couple of integrations and embrace modern practices. Oftentimes people call this the best practices. So one of those offers was everything was custom built, starting from security, going to the interfaces, to the backends, to the integrations. And the price tag on this was through the roof. A couple of days ago, SpaceX launched the spaceship, the space rocket to the International Space Station, and all went well. And I think they did it for less money than what the offer in this was asking. Then we had something called the bleeding edge. Everything was the latest and greatest. Somebody had read on a newspaper that you should build everything on Kubernetes, no idea what it is, but you need to build everything on Kubernetes just to be future-proof. But that often tends to be super expensive as well, if you just go with the buzzwords, if you will. And the one we ended up with, keep it simple. One web app, simple integrations to built-in Azure capabilities, one database, that's it. And the cost was very low. It was done in 2 months. Everybody was happy. It's still up and running. So being future-proof also means that you need to understand when do you go to the left, when do you go to the right in terms of complexity, in terms of technology selections, in terms of where do you invest your time in as a partner, as a business, as an individual. And if you don't like this, you can always go back to this. I spent a lot of years with SharePoint and Exchange and Sky for Business and whatever we had before that, but I'm not missing this. So the idea here is that once you understand that technology is moving, the demands from customers are moving, as is evident through the Eurostat statistics, it also means that we do not have those sort of customers anymore who says, let's go back to SharePoint 2003, because that's what we really liked. We don't really miss that time. But now we also need to understand that the future might be a bit different. One of the questions I often receive when I work with communities is that should you be a specialist or a generalist? And I think back in the day when I grew up, when I was really studying the basics of IT in the early 1990s, I think the the thinking at the time was that you need to be a specialist. You need to go super deep. You need to be the sort of I person, and you need to learn everything there is to a given topic, but not really worry about what's happening left or right. Just go super deep. And lately, I've been happy to see that we're gearing more towards being a generalist, meaning that your company might be focused on certain type of projects or certain type of products or certain type of trainings. But at the same time, customers are often looking for people who know more than one thing. They might need to find somebody who knows a lot about Microsoft Teams implementations, but at the same time, that person would be beneficial if they knew more about Office 365 as well on the side. So in that sense, my general advice is to be more generalist, but when the time arises, you also need to become a specialist on a given topic very rapidly. PayPal, that I think everybody in the US has been using. In Europe, we use this perhaps a little bit less. PayPal introduced a virtual agent, and it's based on AI, meaning that when you open the virtual agent chat, you can type in something and they'll try to come up with a solution for you. So this is the opening. If you have any questions, just type something in. So somebody typed in, I got scammed. Perhaps they lost their money. And when you're not future ready, PayPal will say, great. And perhaps that's the end of the chat, and then you start looking for a phone number to call. So in that sense, you also need to accept the fact that you built your business to be future ready, you ramp up on certain things, but then something changes. COVID-19 might happen, or something else might happen. Then you readjust. And I don't mean to say you cut your losses, it's not about that, but it's about understanding that, okay, we need to move to slightly different direction and perhaps optimize this further, or perhaps discard this and focus on something else. One last final example on projects. This was interesting. This was 2 years ago. Customer wanted to move 70 different virtual machines to the cloud. They'd read that the cloud is the best thing ever, so we want to go there. We have 2 months. Our existing on-premises data center will cease to exist 2 months from now. They will turn off the electricity and that building will no longer exist. So they wanted to go to the cloud, and very rapidly, they had a lot of problems. A lot of the virtual machines they were running were legacy. Windows Server 2003, 17 years old. And I playfully did ask them that, how old is your car that you're driving? Is it 17 years old? If it is, then I accept this fact. But if your car is 2 years old, then you need to look at your IT investment as well. Long story short, we did migrate all of this to the cloud in 2 months, but in the end, we only needed to migrate about 20 virtual machines because we were able to combine a lot of those workloads to multiple VMs, but we were also able to refactor plenty of those old workloads to SharePoint Online, to Teams, to Azure Serverless, to different databases. So we were essentially saving a lot of money as we didn't really need to move everything to the cloud, but we were able to move those in a bit more lightweight approach. The evolution of IT roles, and this applies to developers, IT pros, anybody working in tech really. On the left, you have your typical roles. On the right, you have these sort of recent changes to the roles. And this doesn't mean it applies to all companies, it applies globally. In the Nordics, I'm often seeing we have a lot of engineering and DevOps people now. We also have cloud architects. They might not be developers, but they also might not be people who build servers physically, but they know how to manage those in a virtual world. We also have plenty of data scientists now, but at the same time, we still lack plenty on the business architect side, having somebody understand the business requirements, but being able to architect a solution or instruct an engineer to work on a solution that would support the business. There's often Not a huge disconnect, but often a considerable disconnect between business and IT still, which is a bit sad, but I think it still takes time. Looking at this in a bit more graphical way, the engineering and DevOps on the center, that maps to a lot of different skills in that sense. And what I often give as guidance if I mentor somebody is to look into cloud architect as well as the engineering and DevOps roles, because you can mix and match a lot of those. And as I said before, the business architect one is also highly important in there. One fun thing to be future ready is also to see what others are doing. Here's a nice free open source solution. You can see the short link at the bottom. So instead of building an AI supported rock, paper, scissors, somebody expanded this with a lizard and Spock from Star Trek so that it becomes a bit more complex. And the idea with this solution is that you have a webcam, you play against the computer, and when you're doing these hand signs, the AI service is reading what you're showing and deciding what it will show against you. And the idea here is that you can easily deploy this, and this is something somebody built in order to understand what the future might be. It might be that we play against the computer and the computer is able to understand what we mean with these simple hand signs. So this is a simple example of a complex topic that somebody built. So my survival guide to be future ready, and this is based on what I see at my work at Microsoft, also within the communities I work with, but also based on my experience running a partner business and a learning partner business on what the demand seems to be. And key is understanding the roadmaps. These are public roadmaps. You can find those for Microsoft 365 and Azure. They often map the road multiple years ahead. That way you know what might be relevant year or 2 years from now. Continuous learning, it's a given. And for me, I'm about 40 years old. And for me, the challenge has been to find the willingness to unlearn what I've studied back in the day. In 1997, I spent the whole year learning about network security. And then I worked on network security for quite some time. And now if I have a look at network security, it's kind of the same, but it's totally different. So the willingness to unlearn those things you've studied before and to update that understanding to 2020, that's one of the challenges here. Core things do not really change. Even if you get multiple announcements every day, every night on social media, by email, on newsletters, it doesn't mean that everything changes constantly, but we're optimizing small things, and the big core things, they don't really change. Most of the things I've been using in my career have been the same for about 20 years, which is nice. You also need to give it time. Power Apps, which is part of Power Platform and allows you to build business applications without coding. The initial preview to Power Apps was made available in 2015. I spent a few months then to understand that could this be a solution for some customer needs. And I quickly realized that yes, this is great. I will sell this to all of my customers and I will simply focus on doing Power Apps. I spent the next year, 2016, preaching about this, delivering sessions on this, training on this, ramping up on this, but nobody wanted that. And now, 2019, and especially now in 2020, I see a huge gap in expertise on Power Apps. Customers are ready for it now. It takes 2 to 3 years for that need sometimes to arise. And that's partially mapped to the roadmaps. And one of the best ways for me, if I have a team or if I run a business, one of the best ways to learn is to create proof of concepts. See what preview features are coming out. Also understand what the customers are seeing at the same time, because now customers are often seeing those same preview features at the same time. So you sort of need to see around the corners And when you use those tools, it helps. This has been evident now in the past couple of months. We've had Microsoft Teams for about 3 years, and now everything moved to online. And you can really see who's been using Teams and building their solutions and their offerings around it, and who have been needing to do that forcefully. And it's a bit more painful that way. And finally, you need to scratch that itch, meaning you need to hack around the problems, because often customers are hacking around those problems. Then they start seeking learning opportunities, or they start ramping up their people and certifying them. So building those prototypes yourself quickly and rapidly is often what I feel is a great way to skill up your own people as well. So the last idea that I really like, this is from Nadella's Hit Refresh book. If you haven't read it, it came out a couple of years ago. It's a fairly quick read. I would recommend reading that. The culture of a company, it really needs to be about listening and learning. And when you combine the passion in there, then I would say that's the way to success, especially being future ready. That's all I have on being future ready. There's a link also. So when we are done with today's lectures and when you're done with all of the upcoming LLPA sessions, open up this link. It was released today. It has remote activity, coloring, and problem-solving book. So you can print that out, you can hand it to your kids if you have any, or you can fill it out yourself. I found it's quite relaxing when you figure out what to learn next or how to be future-proof. Alrighty, Michael, did we have any questions?
No, Jussi. I think that all what you told our audience was so clear and interesting that they have no specific questions. We had at the beginning already one question. Maybe it's something that I want to mention is somebody telling us, just curious, which is more advanced? Is it multi-cloud or hybrid? Is that something you can or want to answer?
Yeah, definitely. So hybrid tends to become quite advanced and complex. But the benefit of hybrid is that often when you start building anything on hybrid, meaning you might have your own on-prem data center, you might leverage public cloud services, perhaps from multiple clouds, at least then you know plenty on what you have in your own data center. And that often helps. So finding those stakeholders, those key people within a business is crucial here. And then building it. I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's relatively easy. The multi-cloud then, the challenge in there is that you've often selected one cloud. Let's say that one cloud might be Amazon's AWS. And now you want to build a multi-cloud approach, you might select Azure as the next one. Now, the challenge is not as much technical. I'd say it's more political, meaning what do we have in AWS? What do we have in Azure? Do they need to be on par, both have the same services, or will the other one be a backup if this fails? Or what's the approach here? And once that's clarified, then in essence, you're building a hybrid again. And if you've done that before, then for a multi-cloud, it becomes a bit easier.
Thank you very much for that. So thank you very, very much, Jussi. It was a really great session, and I really enjoyed listening to these stories you promoted to all our people out there, to our audience. And I think it was quite valuable as expected. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you for having me. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any future questions. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Good. Finally, let me share just the last step. I hope you also enjoyed it the same way like I did. And it was really quite interesting session by Jussi. And now we ask you to support us in becoming better, because to train people is always improving everything. And so we are really interested that you support us with giving us your feedback. It's very important to us. It's quite easy to evaluate this session, just scan the QR code you can see on the screen or go to the website that's provided on this slide you can see right now. And remember that each entry is a chance to win one of 5 Microsoft role-based courses that we provide for you. So you can see also if you attend more of our C3 Cloud Skills Tour, then you have the chance to win every time when you attend and every time you give us your feedback. And this Microsoft role-based courses is one of the things that our members can offer to you. And that's one of the final things I want to show you. That's the LLPA, the Leading Learning Partner members. All of them are leading in their countries. All of them are leading technology skills providers around the world and quite happy to support you and your training needs. Do you remember what Jussi is telling you in the last hour? It is all about building skills within your company. It doesn't matter if you're a Microsoft partner providing services to your customers, or if you are the customer building a brand new cloud infrastructure, or developing the next step on your digital journey. It's every time the right time to invest in the skills of your people, and our members around the world are the right place to be to get these skills. So if you're one of the winning attendees and you win one of your role-based trainings, then one of these partners will be your partner of choice to deliver that kind of training for you. Maybe in your country, maybe in your local language, maybe on an international level in English. Everything that we can provide for you is the right date, the right topic, in the right quality. Good. So let me say thank you to all of you. Thank you for attending part 2 of the Cloud Skills Tour. And let me tell you what you can expect the next time on June 9th. The part 3, the balance between tech and skills. That's a quite interesting session. It's really on a great level where people like a chief learning officer of Microsoft Netherlands is talking to you, or Wilfried, our global partner sales executive, talking to you about this great initiative of Microsoft called Technical Skills for Business /ESI, the Enterprise Skills Initiative. How Microsoft invests in customers and their skills. So stay tuned, register for this great session on June 9th, and happy to answer your question. Also, if you have some in the future, just contact us, email us, or visit our website to get in touch with us. Thank you very much. Enjoy your day.